welcome back, everyone, to the Founders Only podcast. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Glenn Gow. Glenn Gow is the CEO Success Coach. He was a CEO for 25 years, a venture capitalist for 5 years, and was trained by a CEO coach for 17 years. He's a Harvard MBA, a board member, and an expert in AI. Welcome, Glenn.
Mia, super happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes. So excited to welcome you today. So can we start with you talking about how you became the CEO Success Coach? Let's hear that story.
Sure. I was lucky enough to be a CEO for 25 years. And as you mentioned in your introduction, I had a coach for 17 of those years. And I grew tremendously. This is why I had a coach. I just kept getting better and better and better. And then I was fortunate again to be recruited into venture capital. Once I was recruited into venture capital, I was asked to begin working with the CEOs of our portfolio companies. So I started coaching them, and I fell in love with that work. I recognized that my combination of having run a business and having been coached for 17 years gave me a skill set that was really valuable for the CEOs of our startup companies. I was getting enormously positive feedback. I was watching them change and do things they wouldn't have done without coaching. And I recognized that's where I get my pleasure in life, is helping others do something that they wouldn't have done without the coaching they get from me.
Yes. When was that? When you were a venture capitalist?
That was 2016 to 2021, 5-year period. And so I started coaching in 2016. And then in 2021, I began doing this full-time, just coaching CEOs.
Right. Were you working in the portfolio companies? Were they global companies or mostly national companies?
They were all global companies.
Okay.
They were all somewhere Series A and up, which is my specialty.
Yep.
And I got to learn, which is a theme we'll talk about today. I got to learn from these CEOs about the challenges they were going through and the best practices to help them address those challenges. And we began addressing or applying those best practices to them and watching them actually grow themselves, which was very, very fulfilling.
And while you were a venture capitalist or working with the venture capitalist firm, were you working in a specific set of industries? Did they specialize in a certain type of business?
No, surprisingly, it was technology, but that's universally true nowadays. And they were addressing different markets with different technologies. And what I learned, Mia, is that the expertise of a CEO doesn't matter whether we're going after a consumer market or a business market.
Absolutely.
Whether we're deep in technology or we're more, let's say, consumer oriented or hardware or software, the challenges that a CEO faces are universal. And what I learned from my role being a CEO, all of that was applicable. And that was a surprising discovery to me, but greatly beneficial to the CEOs I was coaching.
Okay, so now let's go way back. So who was Glenn as a child? Where are you from? What did your parents do? Were you entrepreneurial at a young age?
I had a wonderful childhood, very, very loving parents, grew up in the Northeast and then moved to Florida when I was younger. But what I was that super curious child. I was the one who was always asking why, because I wanted to learn. I just wanted to learn about how the world works and why does that happen and how does that work? And what's really fascinating about that is I'm still the same person. And I get to learn every single time I'm interacting with one of my CEOs. I learn something from them. Mm-hmm. And what's great about that is I might get off a coaching call and hear about what someone just did in the area of fundraising. And then I'm going to get on the next coaching call and say, I'm not going to tell you who that CEO is, but I'm going to tell you what I just learned from them because they're doing something that's really working. We should look at that. And that's one of the best parts of my job is that I keep learning and sharing those learnings. So that's who I was as a child, someone who was super curious, wanted to understand how the world worked and apply best practices everywhere it was possible to do so.
One of the things that we often talk about in this show is kind of looking at why entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs and that evolution from a child to an adult. Because I found over the years of doing this podcast now that there's kind of two buckets of entrepreneurs. There's the ones that were like me. I started my first business at age 7, selling postcards door to door in my neighborhood. And then there's others who had no idea they were going to be an entrepreneur until they were an adult and they stumbled upon a solution for a problem that they had themselves, and they decided, oh well, if other people must have the same problem, and they grew their business from there. So which one are you?
I'm the second one.
Okay.
I'm the second one. And in the story I was telling you about, I had an opportunity to begin interacting with the CEOs of our portfolio companies. And I didn't know I was going to be a great coach. I didn't know there was a great need for CEO coaching, even though I had that. I didn't know it was something that every CEO could benefit from. I asked the question, Mia, of any CEO who's not sure whether or not they need a coach, why is it that every great athlete in the world has a coach? If they're at the top of their game, why do they have a coach? It's because they recognize a coach helps them become even better. And that's a powerful mindset that I encourage any CEO to have, is how do you become even better? And a coach is one powerful way to do that.
I agree very much, very much. What was the most transformational lesson you learned from being coached as a CEO for 17 years? And how does that shape your approach with clients today?
At one point, when I was being coached, I was unhappy with the way things were happening in my company. And my coach said something to me, Mia, that was really hard for me to hear. She said, Glenn, that's your fault. And I said, what? How could that be my fault? I gave everybody instructions on what to do, and we had meetings about it, and blah, blah, blah. And she said, Glenn, that's your fault. And I kept denying it was my fault until she helped me understand that either I hired the wrong people, or I didn't communicate well enough, or I wasn't managing the culture, or I wasn't holding people accountable, I wasn't being a good leader. There was something about me that was enabling that to happen. And while that was painful to acknowledge, it was the most powerful thing for me to recognize that everything I do, as a CEO, everything I do, everything I say, the way I do things, the way I say things matter. And it creates behavior, either the right behavior or the wrong behavior, but it emanates from me. And while it was painful at first, it became extraordinarily powerful later when I recognized I ultimately am responsible for everything. So I had to think about everything I was doing, how I was communicating it, whether or not I was holding people accountable, how I was holding them accountable. And it transformed me as a leader. And so I point this out to the CEOs I'm coaching. Sometimes they don't want to hear that they're at fault, but they recognize the truth in that statement. That was very transformational for me.
I think that is potentially, and we're going to talk about this later, but I think that that's one of the characteristics of a great CEO is that self-awareness,
Absolutely. Yeah.
acknowledging and accepting full responsibility and accountability for running for everything running smoothly, and moving forward. If it's not moving forward, then you are the captain, you are the general, so to speak. So you have to look at what what you're doing first. Um, I'm curious, when you first start working with a new client CEO, do you mention this story or this idea very, very early? Or do you find that you mention it when it comes up? Like when they come to you with a moment like you had with your coach, is that when you generally say this? Or because I would think that if it were me, I may say it in the very beginning to say, just so you understand how I view CEOs and their leadership and their responsibility and accountability for running the business. This is what I think. What do you think about that?
So every CEO I work with has different needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so my approach is unique. It's bespoke. It is to focus on what is going to help that CEO the most in that moment. I think of myself as having this incredible tool belt of tools, and I'm going to pull out the right tool when I see an opportunity to apply it. But I don't know that that one lesson I learned is applicable to this CEO at this moment. And so it just sits in my tool belt until I realize it's going to create change. That's ultimately my job, is to create change in the behavior of the CEO so they can be more powerful, they can be more impactful, they can be more positive, they can make change happen amongst their leaders. And so I'm going to bring it out when it fits, but only when it
I
fits.
love that. That makes a lot of sense. I love that. What are the most common blind spots you see in startup founders? And what advice do you have to help them overcome those challenges?
Well, I would say it's a recognition that their to-do list is too long,
Mm,
and and that they don't recognize there's a way out of that. So when I was a CEO, my to-do list was 51 things long every day, because all those things had to get done. But I learned that I couldn't get 51 things done in a day or a week or even a quarter, and I had to choose what was most important. It was a very challenging exercise to acknowledge that today I'm only going to get 3 things done and 48 things are not going to get done. That was painful for me. And yet, by focusing on those things that are going to move the needle the most, whether it's because it's most strategic or it's most urgent, I'm going to get those things done. That enabled me to continually improve and grow the organization, and to become comfortable with a whole lot of things that aren't going
hmm
to get done was another skill associated with this. And so every day, even now, I have to ask myself, am I focused on the things that matter the most? And
hmm
this is a conversation I have often with my CEOs, is how do we determine what's most important here? Because often people will be focused on something because it landed in their inbox or in their Slack channel, or someone said something snarky in a meeting. And they focus on these things because they show up, not because they're important. And so the blind spot is to say, one of your most valuable assets is your time. We have to manage it extraordinarily carefully. We have to ask the question of what is most important to me in the moment. Most important to me in the moment could be, I need to go meditate for half an hour. That might be the thing I know is going to give me the greatest result.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's making those choices, being fully intentional about those choices, and not allowing the outside world to choose what's important.
So prioritizing your time and leveraging your time, would you say that would
Well,
be
yes, and
what
okay,
makes
the leveraging part is all about delegation. One of the things
right?
I do with my CEOs is I say, I want you to become the world's greatest delegator, and we're going to work on that. And it's going to take time, because in order for you to become the world's greatest delegator, you have to have a great team reporting to you. You can't delegate to people who can't get the work done. But if ultimately what we're trying to do is get you, the CEO, to focus on what's most important and where you can move the needle, then you have to have a great team. Then you're going to become a great delegator to that team. And there's a whole series of things we can do to ensure that your team is going to get done what you want to get done in the time you want to get that done, and hold people accountable to that. And so those are some of the key skill areas where, when I ask CEOs, how good are you at delegation? Most of them are pretty honest, and they don't rate themselves very highly. And that's great, because that's an opportunity for that CEO to grow.
Definitely agree. After talking to so many founders at different levels of experience, what do you think are some essential daily habits for a CEO? And I'm thinking more of morning routine, night routine. Do you have any perspective on that?
I do. So I look at the way things start is, first you have to take care of yourself. Then you have to take care of your team. Then you go to work on the things that are most important outside of that. So by taking care of yourself, part of the work I do with my CEOs is we determine what's important to you. Tell me about work-life balance and where does that fit in? Tell me about spending time with your family. Tell me how many friends you have and whether or not you're spending time with those friends. When's the last time you took a vacation? Do you exercise? Do you meditate? What's your nutrition look like? What does it feel like when you start the day? Are you feeling down or are you feeling inspired? And so taking care of yourself is the first order of the day. You might do it in the middle of the day. You might work out in the afternoon. That's fine, but having a plan for that needs to be done either the night before or in the morning. Best time to do it for most people is early morning, whatever it is that's going to get you prepared for that day. Then you want to ask yourself, as a CEO, my greatest leverage point is my leadership team. How do I ensure that they are doing the same thing? They are feeling the same way. If I had a leadership team that wakes up in the morning depressed and unhappy, they're not going to be great performers that day. So how do I help them get to a place where they're performing at their highest level? And it's my job to do that. It's only then that I can go look at, okay, what are the things we've decided are important now where I can have an impact? Let's say it's investor relations or whatever the case may be. Now I'm going to go focus on that. But I've taken care of the most important things first.
You mentioned work-life balance, and I know this is a concept that a lot of people are talking about now and questioning if it's really a thing. Do you believe that work-life balance is achievable?
100%.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, right now, I work 20 hours a week, and I really don't want to work more than that. And I make more than I have before, and I am enjoying my job more than I was before, and I work less. So there's just me as one example. But for anybody who is a CEO, the question is, what is it that you're looking to get out of this role long term? And in the moment, it might feel like I have enormous pressure from my investors. We're behind on the numbers. I have to go hire the right people. I'm going to feel a lot of pressure. So the way I think about this is, if you are a type A performance-driven person, then in fact, having balance is going to help you perform at a higher level. There's a performance curve that starts to decline if you didn't get enough sleep, if you didn't eat well, if you haven't talked to your friends in 3 months. You actually decline. You might put in more hours, but you're not getting more out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I believe is that fundamentally having time to relax or do something fun or do something that is outside of the realm of work enables you to come back into the work environment and be a rock star. That's how work-life balance really works.
How do you think, or have you had a client where you identify that they really don't have a regimen, I guess, They're not living by their calendar. I say sometimes, show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So, if have you ever encountered a CEO that doesn't have that habit where they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants? And if so, could you tell me how you made that transformation or how they made that transformation or you encouraged them to make that transformation to actually build a habit of integrating their entire life into a calendar, if you know
Sure.
what I mean?
Sure. Sure. And it's very common, Mia. So yes, happens all the time. And it has to do with pressure. It has to do with I'm feeling like I have these 51 things I have to get done, and if I don't get them done, the company's going to fail, or I'm never going to put food on my table, or whatever the case may be. And so we may even talk more about this later, but having some sort of management framework is critical. Okay, some people use the traction framework, which is great. My favorite is OKRs. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what framework you have. You have to have a framework, though. And here, you have, excuse me, you have to have a framework in place. And here's why. It's about accountability. So I just went through this exercise with one of my CEOs. We installed OKRs as a framework, and I was reviewing them with my CEO, and I said, you don't have any key results signed up for on this list of OKRs. Objectives and key results, if no one knows what OKRs are. And a key result is simply, what are you going to get done that you're responsible for in the next 90 days that's measurable? So we added some key results for the CEO, responsibilities things they have to get done in the next 90 days. And now I can hold my CEO accountable. Or they can hold themselves accountable. But somebody has to hold that person accountable. That creates enormous focus. And the beauty of that is the example I use later is recognizing there are a lot of things we'd like to get done. We're choosing not to do right now because they're not the most important things right now. And this applies, by the way, to your personal life. So you can have your own, and I've developed this myself and I've developed this with other CEOs. What are the key things that I want to get done in my personal life? And you either develop a discipline of holding yourself accountable or you ask me to help you hold you accountable. And once you are in that accountability mindset, that's where you get things done.
Very much agree. Very much agree. But I want to deep dive a little bit into the calendar idea
Oh, sure.
because for me personally, I really saw such a improvement in work-life balance specifically once I really integrated my personal life into a single calendar basically,
Sure.
or at least a shared view of a
Sure.
calendar where I can see all of my personal obligations and engagements along with my professional ones in a day and making sure that I'm sticking to that. But for me, it's been very hard to stick to it. It's easier once it's on my calendar for sure, you know, and I
Absolutely.
tell my team, if it's not on my calendar, forget it. You know, if it's a task, I have my assistant, let's say it's a goal, a 90-day goal. I know we all have to break up our goals at the beginning of a quarter. So
Right.
everybody has their 90-day goals. Take the time to figure out what that action plan is and break that out over the 90 days. If
Right.
you don't, at the end of the 90 days, nothing will be done.
That's right.
Or you'll be 10% done, right? And this is how I look at this for myself as well. You know, I completely agree with your idea of when you have that accountability, that's when you really see that transformation. When you have that accountability mindset, I think that's beautifully said. I I know I have struggled with holding myself accountable to my calendar on a daily basis. And I
Sure.
just wonder if you have any idea about any advice for how to build that habit in.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I won't show you my calendar, but I'll describe it.
Yeah.
So you cannot meet with me Monday and Wednesday mornings. Why? Because I'm going stand-up paddleboarding with my wife. You can't. My calendar's blocked. My wife expects to go stand-up paddleboarding with me. I'm gonna fulfill on that. You can't schedule with me Tuesday or Thursday afternoons because I'm going e-foiling or wing foiling.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
You can't schedule with me. You can't schedule with me Friday afternoon, Mia, because I'm doing planning. I protect that time on my calendar. Now, that's step one. Step two is being true to yourself. To say, I blocked out that time. Now I'm going to do the thing I blocked out the time for. And I'm not going to be checking email. I'm not going to be looking at my texts. I'm not going to be wasting my time doing something else. I'm going to commit myself to get done what I've asked myself I want to get done, whether it's something fun or something working like planning. And so you need to create a discipline and hold yourself accountable and ask yourself, if you didn't spend 2 hours planning on Friday afternoon, like your calendar said, on Monday, you need to ask yourself, what is it about my thinking that has enabled me not to hold myself accountable? So this is about being self-aware. So it's not about beating yourself up. It's not about saying, oh, you're a terrible CEO. That's not helpful. It's just asking the question, what got in the way of me doing what I said was most important? And you learn about how you think about the world, and then you say, I'm going to change. Subtle changes in the way you think about the world will help you get done what's most important to you. And frankly, this is why I had a coach for 17 years. It's really helpful to have someone looking over your shoulder saying, how is that going? And holding you accountable.
Golden nugget, you guys. That is, yes, that's so helpful.
Meet Brandy, your all-in-one content creation sidekick designed to make creating and managing your brand's content effortless. Let me show you how it works. Got a team? Bring them in. With Brandy, everyone can pitch in to create content that clicks. Managing multiple brands? Easily switch between profiles so you're always ready for the next project. The Brand Voice Analyzer ensures your content always sounds like you. Stuck on where to start? Check out our handy prompt templates. They're like creative jumpstarts to get things moving. Every edit, every version saved. With content revision history, nothing gets lost, and you can always pick up right where you left off. Everything your brand needs, it's all right here in your brand asset library. Stay organized like a pro with custom folders for every project. No more hunting for that one file. Brandy does too, and is ready to help you connect. Or in any language, really. Speak to your audience in the words they know best. Need ideas or have questions? Just ask Brandy. Save time with custom snippets. Your most used phrases, always handy when you need them. Keep your notes, links, and ideas in one spot, so you're never hunting for that one piece of inspiration. Get personalized content tips and SEO strategies to help your brand stand out online. Join Brandy today and make your content creation smarter, faster, and better. Let's create something amazing.
So, what's one thing you've learned the hard way that you now consider non-negotiable in business? You've already given a bunch of golden nuggets, so give us another one.
It's about people who aren't performing. So all of us, me included, come up with reasons why not to deal with that situation. Oh, but they were one of the first employees in the company. Oh, their spouse just lost their job. Oh, they're going through a tough time. Lots of reasons why we let people skate, or we hope they're going to get better. And we have to ask ourselves, and maybe you can run a company and say, I'm going to be benevolent. I'm going to do that. You can choose that. Most people don't choose that pathway. They say, I'm responsible to the shareholders to create the greatest value for the company. And so we have to make a decision when someone isn't performing well. There's a key question to ask. Am I willing to invest the time? And it's going to take my time as a CEO. Am I willing to invest the time to help that person get from this level to a great level or not? And I have to think about what does that investment, what does that investment look like? And most of the time, it's a pretty big investment of time. And if you decide it's not worth it, you have decided to terminate that person. That doesn't mean you terminate them that afternoon, because you might have to backfill, you have to find a way, but you're going to terminate them. And you want to make that decision quickly. And it's a difficult decision. This is why we delay those decisions. We feel badly for that person. We know they're going to go through a bump in the road or maybe something more serious as a result of this. But we have to look out, or if we choose to do this, we have most CEOs who have investors have to look out for the good of the shareholders. But we can't delay these decisions. And we often do that. And we regret it. No CEO has ever said, oh, I wish I hadn't fired that person a long time ago. They're always relieved when they finally do. There are rare circumstances, I'd say, in maybe 15% of the time you ask that question, am I willing to invest the time to help this person get from this level to this level? And you say yes. But you have to make that commitment to help them get there. So that's one of the more difficult ones.
Yes. I would say I still sometimes struggle with this personally, but I know I struggled with it significantly more in my earlier years as a CEO. And the two quotes that always come to my mind when I'm dealing with this type of decision is, one, I don't think I've ever regretted terminating someone. That's
Right.
number one. So yes, you may not regret hiring them, but will you regret terminating them?
I've never heard anybody say they've ever regretted
No,
terminating someone.
no. And then the second thing is, you either coach people up or coach people out.
Right.
And their decision, and really the decision is on them, which bucket they fall in. If they're going to be coached up or coached out. But I also think, and this is not really a quote, but I remember at a mastermind event, we were looking at how to make sure that the right person is in the right seat.
Right.
Because you may have a person in your organization who has got the values and the work ethic that they need to be a part of the group.
Right.
But may not be in the right seat. And so you also have to consider, in my opinion, when if you're going to coach up, that's really when, well, if you haven't already figured that out, before you start coaching up, you have to make sure you're coaching in the right position,
That's right.
You talked in the beginning about the sports analogy, which is actually something that I use a lot in my own organization, in terms of coaching and explaining explaining coaching, what it is at its heart, at its core.
Yeah.
Is the sports analogy is usually a great way to paint that picture for a team member, to explain, okay, think of us as a sports team, and your position is to make your role is to make a shot, to score a shot, or to block, or to whatever. I'm not a sports expert, so I won't give a bunch of examples here because I'll make myself look foolish. But I think everybody understands the point. If you have someone who should be a shooting guard in a different position, then that's your fault as the CEO.
That's right.
You need to transition them to another position if they want to do that. But my other point was going to be, when in this mastermind event, we looked at, does the person enjoy the role? Are they good at the role?
Mm-hmm.
And what is that intersection? Do they fit into the organization in terms of value alignment, and are they supportive of the mission and the vision? If they have those things, is what they're doing something they enjoy and something that they're good at, right?
Right, right. Then that's perfect. The perfect match.
Yes, yes. So what's the difference between a great leader and a good one when it comes to business?
The way I describe being a leader creates followers.
Mm, mm,
And so a great leader recognizes that it's not just about hiring great people, but it's getting those people to want to follow you. And how do you do that? You think about the way to motivate people. You give them autonomy. You help them become better at their job. You pay them well. You give them tremendous positive feedback when they deserve that positive feedback, and you're very honest with them about where they need to improve. You work with them in a way that causes them to say, I'm not going to find a better place to work than this. I'm not going to get all of these things somewhere else, because the grass always looks greener and the recruiter does call. But ultimately, I'm creating followers, people who want to believe in my vision and believe in what we're doing and feel like everything's an opportunity in front of them as opposed to a grind.
so well said. Absolutely agree. What are the key indicators that a CEO needs to shift from doing to leading? And how do you facilitate that transition?
Um, I don't think there are any key leading indicators. It's the day you start.
Mm,
The day you start, you need to hire someone who you're going to start delegating to. Okay. And the CEO, yes, has certain skill sets that in certain cases, maybe 5% of the total cases of things that need to get done in a company, only they can do. But they need to find the team and delegate to the team 95% of the work. And that needs to start immediately. Every day, a CEO needs to ask themselves, how can I find someone who's better at doing this thing or a lot cheaper at doing this thing? Or, by the way, since we haven't talked about it yet, how can I get AI to do this thing for me? But you want to be the leader immediately. There's no waiting.
okay. Do you have any advice around how to maintain visibility and traction on your annual strategic plan? And boy, I'm excited to hear this answer.
Well, we touched on it earlier.
Yeah, we did.
Have a management framework. And my favorite is objectives and key results. So if you have an annual plan, what objectives and key results does is it helps it break it down into quarterly segments. The reason that's valuable is people can put their head down and focus on a 90-day sprint. They can get into execution mode for 90 days. Now, every 90 days or so, we're going to lift up our head and say, are we doing the right thing? Should we adjust these? Are we on path to accomplish our annual goal? And that's a healthy exercise. But then we're going to go put our heads down now and focus on execution, which is what you want your organization to do. And so I find that, and I've been told by many of my CEOs, it was the most important change they made in the way they manage the company. And the beauty of it is everybody understands what they're supposed to do. We have great clarity on what we're attempting to get done. We can collaborate with each other because we understand what Mia's trying to do, what Glenn's trying to do, and we can work together. And this is also a tool for the CEO to hold everybody accountable. And the last piece is we can check in every single week in the one-on-one on how well we're doing against this key result we're trying to accomplish. So it has so many incredible benefits. I encourage anyone and everyone to use it. I use them myself.
You brought up something at the end there that I was going to follow up with. So, what is the cadence of other meetings beyond annual What is
Oh,
the
sure.
what is the cadence of meetings, whether they be one-on-one meetings or group meetings, what have you? What do you say are the key meetings and frequencies that you think are essential in order to keep that visibility and traction on the direction for the year?
Sure, I'll share best practices from the CEOs that I coach. First, it's always a weekly one-on-one. Some people hear, oh my God, I have 8 direct reports. That's 8 hours blown. That's the wrong way to look at it. First of all, they don't all have to be an hour long. Secondly, you can control the agenda so they don't become discussions about things that are not important. Third, your most valuable and important thing to do as a CEO after you hire a great team is to get that team to perform. And this is the most useful way to cause that to happen. You work with the individual about the issues that they're challenged with to help them become a great performer. And if you don't do that every week, they will go off track and the company's growth slows down as a result. Leadership team meetings, either once every week or every other week, and all hands meetings, a minimum of once a month, sometimes more frequently, depending on what's going on in the company.
What practices do you recommend for founders to maintain resilience and avoid burnout during intense periods of company growth?
So there's a paradox here, which is when things get more intense, you need to take care of yourself more. You may actually work fewer hours. You're going to do a lot less during those hours because you're going to focus on the intensity. Let's say you're raising money and you're getting close. You absolutely need to raise this money. Well, if you don't want to be in front of a group of investors when you're exhausted, when you're not enthusiastic, when you're worried about everything else that's happening, you need to take care of yourself in very simple ways. Sleep is the thing that CEOs get the least of. That's the most important thing they should be getting. Okay, I'll say it differently. Too many CEOs don't get enough sleep, and that hurts them a lot. And then they're on the road, so they eat lousy. I don't get that. Why do you have to eat lousy if you're on the road? There's no correlation to that, and yet that happens. And then you don't feel good the rest of the day. And then you go to an investor, and you haven't slept, you haven't exercised, you haven't meditated if that's something you do, you haven't talked to your family, you're feeling massive tension, and you're going to perform very poorly in that discussion. So you want to ask yourself, how do I get to a place mentally and physically and emotionally where I can perform at my highest level? And so I had one of my CEOs say to me, Glenn, when I reach that time, I want to be in a position to perform at my highest level. In fact, what I do is I say, it's showtime. But imagine you're on stage and it's showtime. You have to feel good doing that. Otherwise, people are going to see through. Oh, this person's really worried. This person's desperate. This person doesn't know what they're talking about. This person isn't answering questions well. It's going to catch up to you if you don't take care of yourself first.
In my organization, I consider myself to be someone, and funny thing is to be blunt, I'm not sure I embody this as much in the broader world as I do within my organization, but the level of compassion and consideration that I have for my team, I've gotten so much feedback that they feel that from me.
Wonderful.
And I've shown up in that way, right? I haven't just said it, I've done it, right? I've done the things, when we had someone whose father passed away very suddenly, and we raised a lot of money internally to give it to them so that they didn't have to worry about, the time off, or if they, just little things they're actually not little things. They're
No,
big.
they're not. They're being, you're being that leader that people want to follow. And it's not just that person you were being compassionate to. Everybody else in the company watched you.
Yes.
And they
Yes.
thought, Mia is a compassionate leader. She's the kind of person I want to follow. So that's fantastic.
Yes. I agree. What I've noticed is when the time came after that, not just after that, but when the time came that I needed their compassion and consideration for myself, they showed up for me.
Yeah, I believe that.
And that I didn't do it for that reason, of course.
Right?
But it's just a word of advice, I guess, for our listeners, right?
I think it's fantastic of you to do that. And I call it depositing some karma into their emotional bank account. You're just depositing it, and it's good. And if it comes back, great. If it doesn't, you still did a great thing for that person.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. How important is it for a CEO to adopt a learning mindset? And what are some practical ways to cultivate that daily?
I think it's one of the more important things so that you are continually getting better. And the very best way to do that is become great at asking questions. When you ask questions, at least two things happen. One, you learn something about a topic. You become a little bit more educated about that topic. The second thing that happens is you learn a lot about the person answering the question. Is this person really on top of their game? Do they really understand this topic? Can they be even more helpful on my team because of the way they're answering this question? Do they have a strategic mindset, or are they just a doer and want to follow directions and can't think outside the box? And you can, by asking questions, you also, you're a good question asker, okay? You have an opportunity to bond with people as well, because it's not that often, especially at the CEO level, that the CEO says, well, tell me more about how you're thinking about that. Instead, they say, why didn't you do that? And if we can get into a dialogue, what I call an adult to adult dialogue, not a parent child dialogue, which often happens from the CEO to the employee. If we get into an adult to adult dialogue, you'll be very surprised at what kind of talent people have that maybe they've never shared with you. So it's asking questions is the very best thing you can do.
Yes. Well, let's get into AI.
Oh, sure.
So what are some ways that today's founders can leverage AI to become more effective leaders and decision makers?
Well, let's talk about culture for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the most important thing a CEO can do is create a culture of constant learning, and to help everyone in the company understand that AI is transforming things. It's like a rising tide. We can't stop it. So we need to adopt it. We need to become comfortable with it. We need to start using it. We need to learn what's good and bad about it, because not everything's great about it. We need to learn every single piece of software that we have now has some form of AI incorporated into it. So we need to learn how to use the tools inside the software we've always used. And we need to experiment with it. And we have to, so one of the best examples was the CEO got up in front of the company in an all hands meeting and said, for the next 3 weeks, everybody in the company has to use AI every day. It's a mandate. And then at the end of 3 weeks, I want you to come back to your boss and tell them what you learned. What worked? What didn't work? What did you experiment with? And then you're going to share those best practices in front of everybody in the company. What did we learn? Because there's a challenge with AI, or there's several challenges. One is people are sometimes afraid of it. And so as a CEO, we need to be clear, look, either you're going to use AI or I'm going to hire somebody who's going to use AI. Simple, pretty simple. So you better be that person who's using AI. The second is, it's sometimes not very helpful, depending on how we interact with it. I'm talking about large language models now. And so a lot of smart people will use AI and they'll say, well, it really didn't help me all that much. And that's because we haven't explored exactly how it can help us and what are the limits of where it can help us. So example, every day I use 4 large language models when I have a prompt in mind. First, I'll ask one AI model to help me build a prompt. I'll say, here's my situation. I'm going to be on Mia Horm's great podcast. I want you to help me think about what she's going to want to talk about. Build me a prompt to prepare, and I'll get a prompt back, and I can tweak that prompt. And then I give it to 4 different large language models, and I run that, and I look at the answers. And every once in a while, I'll just get like, that's a horrible answer. That large language model doesn't know what it's talking about. But this one's really good. And they're different depending on the types of prompts we give them. But now, it's not the number of times I use AI every day. It's when do I not use AI every day? I mean, I use it for everything because it's a powerful tool and I'm learning how to use it. And my team is learning how to use it because I tell them, go solve this problem and use this tool. And if you're not using it, I'm going to have to find somebody else who is. Because it gives you superpower. And so that's what I mean by culture. It's helping people not be afraid of this, understand we're learning about how it works and how it doesn't work, understanding the limits of it. And oh, by the way, what doesn't work this week is going to work next week. So we have to keep experimenting with it because it's getting better. Mm-hmm. And then if you're building a product, I'm going to push really hard to ask, how are you incorporating AI into your product? And you'd be surprised at how few people are thinking about that, and yet how many opportunities exist to incorporate AI into the products or services that we are building.
One of the things that I've been talking about with several people over the last few months is kind of how AI is evolving the workforce and how people who are making hiring decisions are thinking about how a person is leveraging AI and the absolute necessity of it. And you mentioned this idea of, not every large language model is going to give you the best answer, regardless of how great your prompt is. Actually, it depends. Right. Some of them have different skill sets, right?
That's right. That's
different, not skill sets, but things they do better than others.
Well said.
Topics or what have you. And so I've been talking about this idea of like, what are the skills that the human workforce need beyond just learning the AI landscape, so to speak? So not just what is AI, how do I write a prompt, how do I technically use AI, but how do I assess the responses? And what are the skills that a person needs in order to be effective at using AI beyond the technical side? And what I think is critical thinking skills and adaptability.
So this has to do specifically with critical thinking. So let's pick a simple example. Let's say I'm going to send an email to someone about a challenging topic. Okay, maybe one of my CEOs might have a customer that's thinking about churning. Okay, and it's going to require an email, even though that communication should be done via Zoom or in person. But in this case, we'll just use the example. So Normally I'd sit down and start writing the email. I know what to say. I know this customer. I can write that email. But before I send it, I realize, hey, wait a minute. I have this tool that just might help me write this better. So for me, I tend to write short, blunt sentences. That's not good for this particular kind of communication. In fact, AI has taught me that. It says, Glenn, you kind of write in a blunt, straightforward way. The way you explain this topic is you have a customer that's a little bit unhappy. Let's look at other ways of communicating. And I accept that feedback. So first of all, I have to say, and sometimes I might not. I might say, that doesn't know what it's talking about. But more often than not, I say, I can learn from that feedback. And I don't have to become a great writer. Instead, I'm going to give it a prompt now. I'm going to say, here's what I was going to write. Here's the situation. See if you can give me 3 examples of better emails. And I don't have to like any of them. Maybe my original one was still the best one, but I become the evaluator. It's like having, that's why I like, it's like having a co-pilot, somebody next to me that I can say, well, what do you think? And maybe sometimes I don't like their answer, but sometimes, in most of the cases, most of the time, I get a better result by working together. So the critical thinking is about making sure we're asking the right question. When we think about a prompt, it's essentially a question. We have to become good at that. Then we can let AI go off and do whatever work, whether it's research or writing or what have you. And then we critically evaluate the response. But I find that in general, I'm getting better at everything because I have this co-pilot next to me.
Well said. What is one book, just one, podcast or resource that has profoundly impacted your perspective and mindset as a founder? That's probably the hardest question I'm going to ask you.
Well, my favorite podcast is called Top Line.
Okay.
It's about go-to-market leaders. And one of the hosts is AJ Bruno. And there are 2 others as well. And their insights are just very applicable to founders. I learn something every time I listen to that podcast. And so I'm a dedicated, loyal listener. That's my favorite.
Do they focus a little bit on mindset or a lot?
No, a lot. They talk about what's happening and why are some companies not doing well? Why are some companies doing well? What is causing that? Not only they look at it from a macroeconomic standpoint and from a perspective about the founders and how they're thinking about the business. That's the mindset part.
Gotcha. And where can people find you on social media, Glenn?
The easiest thing to do is just find my name, Glenn Gow, Glenn with 2 N's, because that's my website address, glenngow.com. And Mia, if I may, I'd also like to invite any CEOs listening to this podcast to contact me to see if they'd like to be a guest on my brand new podcast called The Scaling CEO. It's a great way to position that CEO or you as a CEO as a thought leader and to attract talent to your company.
And what is that, a video podcast or an audio podcast or?
It's both. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
The Scaling CEO.
Scaling CEO, you guys. The Scaling CEO. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Glenn.
It was a pleasure.
Yes. I hope everybody listening, this was as enlightening and insightful as I did. And we will see you next time. Thank you. Bye.